I see you in that empty room where silence has become too loud. The chair where someone used to sit now holds only their absence. Your phone doesn't ring like before. Friends who promised to stay have slowly disappeared, leaving only digital ghosts. Each night stretches longer than the last, and mornings arrive without purpose. I know this solitude that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy cloak, but listen carefully, beloved soul. Within this very emptiness, a door waits to be discovered, not to escape your solitude, but to transform it into the sacred ground where your true strength will finally awaken. I, too, have walked alone through the empty corridors of abandonment. There was a season in my life when silence became my only companion, when even the walls of Kanya seemed to turn away from me. I remember how the bazaar could be filled with 1,000 voices, yet none spoke directly to my heart. I would return each evening to rooms that felt increasingly hollow, despite the cushions and carpets that adorned them. There is a particular sound to a home where laughter has departed, a specific weight to meals eaten alone. You know this weight. You carry it even now as you listen to my words. But it was during one such evening, as the sun painted the sky amber before departing, that I discovered something that would forever change my understanding of solitude. I was sitting in my garden, watching how shadows gradually claimed territory from light. The birds had gone silent, even the street dogs had retreated to their hidden corners. I felt so profoundly alone that my chest ached with a physical pain, as if loneliness itself had become a stone lodged between my ribs. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Allah, why have you abandoned me to this emptiness?" The answer did not come as thunder or revelation. It arrived as a gentle shift in perception, like a curtain moving slightly to reveal a window that was always there. Solitude was not the absence of connection, it was the purification of connection. The crowded marketplace of relationships had been temporarily closed so that I might finally hear the voice that speaks beneath all other voices. In the deepest chamber of my aloneness, I found not emptiness, but presence. This is what I wish to share with you today. Solitude is not your punishment, it is your preparation. Many seek to escape solitude as if it were a prison. They fill their hours with noise, with distractions, with the voices of strangers who cannot possibly know their heart. They check their phones 100 times, hoping for a message that will save them from having to face the quiet room, the untouched bed, the single plate on the table. I understand this impulse. The mind prefers even painful company to the risk of being truly alone. But this avoidance only delays the meeting that must eventually occur, the meeting between your wounded self and the deeper self that waits patiently beneath the pain. Consider how the most precious gems are formed in darkness, under immense pressure, in chambers no eye has seen. Consider how the seed must be buried in solitude before it can emerge as the flowering plant. Consider how the prophet must retreat to the mountain before returning with wisdom. Your solitude serves a similar purpose. It is not empty space, it is sacred space. God has not abandoned you to this silence. God speaks through this silence, if only you will listen with the ears of the heart rather than the ears of need. When Shams of Tabriz first entered my life, he filled it with light and purpose. When he disappeared, I thought the light had gone with him. I searched every street and alleyway. I questioned travelers. I sent messengers to distant cities. For months, my life became a desperate quest to end the solitude his absence had created. But one night, exhausted from searching, I finally surrendered to the emptiness. I stopped running from it and instead sat down inside it, like one might sit beside a well to draw water. And there, in that surrender, I found that Shams had never truly left. The connection I sought outside was waiting inside all along. This is the secret I offer you. The love and connection you seek externally must first be discovered internally. The companionship you crave from others becomes possible only when you have made peace with your own company. There is a voice in the silence that will teach you if you are brave enough to listen. There is a hand in the darkness that will guide you if you are humble enough to reach for it. There is a presence in the emptiness that never leaves, even when all other presences have departed. Begin with this simple practice. Each morning, before reaching for your phone, before inviting the world's noise into your sacred solitude, Sit for 3 minutes with your hand placed gently over your heart. Feel its steady rhythm. Breathe slowly, counting to 4 as you inhale, holding for a moment, then counting to 6 as you exhale. With each breath, whisper internally, I am not alone in my aloneness. God rests here with me. This small ritual becomes a doorway through which grace enters quietly, like morning light beneath the door before it fills the room. Remember this truth that contradicts what the world has taught you. Your completeness does not depend on another's presence. The cup that appears empty to ordinary vision is filled with invisible wine to the eye of the heart. Your solitude is not the absence of love, but the purification of your capacity to truly love. When others abandoned you, they did not take your value with them. They simply created the space necessary for you to discover your value apart from their recognition of it. Walk this path with gentle discipline. Order your solitude rather than escaping it. Clean one corner of your home with complete presence. Prepare a meal for yourself with the same care you would offer a beloved guest. Speak kindly to your reflection as you would to a friend who carries the same wounds you bear. These small acts of faithful attention gradually transform emptiness into fullness, abandonment into abundant solitude. The heart learns to trust its own company. The soul discovers that it was never truly alone. There is a particular quality to the silence that follows loss. It differs from all other silences. It has weight and texture. It has its own particular scent, like the lingering perfume of someone who has left the room. I have known this silence intimately. When my father passed from this world, leaving behind his books and prayer beads, I found myself sitting for hours beside the objects that remained while the person had gone. I would pick up his teacup, still marked with his fingerprints, and wonder how something so fragile could outlast something so vital. Perhaps you are sitting now with similar objects, a jacket that still carries their scent, a chair where they always sat, messages you cannot bring yourself to erase. The person is gone, yet everywhere you look, traces remain. This contradiction is the first wound of grief. I remember wandering the streets of Kenya after losing someone dear to me, amazed that the merchants still called out their wares, that children still played in courtyards, that the sun still rose and set with indifferent regularity. How could the world continue when something essential had stopped? I wanted to grab strangers by the shoulders and say, "Don't you know what has happened? Don't you feel this rupture in the universe?" But of course, they continued with their lives, untouched by the particular absence that had torn my world apart. This isolation is the second wound of grief, the realization that your inner storm remains invisible to the world that continues around you. I know your heart carries this burden. I know the heaviness that makes even simple tasks feel impossible. I know how grief arrives in waves when you least expect it, while preparing a meal, during a moment of laughter that suddenly collapses into tears, upon waking to the fresh realization that the loss is still true. I know you wonder if this pain will ever lessen, if you will ever feel whole again, if happiness is still possible in a world where such a loss could occur. I want to ask you something, and I ask you to be honest with me and yourself. Do you sometimes feel guilty when moments of joy or peace find you, as if enjoying life dishonors what you have lost? If this touched something real inside you, if you recognize this struggle, write in the comments, "I am learning to carry both my grief and my joy." When you share this, you're not just freeing yourself, you're lighting a candle for someone still walking in darkness. Your courage to speak truth may be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. There's a teaching about grief that I received not from books, but from witnessing how water behaves when it meets an obstacle. The stream does not argue with the ice boulder. It does not stop flowing altogether. It does not pretend the boulder is not there. Instead, it yields, finding new channels, creating new patterns, embracing the obstacle while continuing its essential journey toward the sea. This is the wisdom grief eventually teaches, though it cannot be rushed or forced. Life continues not by denying loss, but by flowing around it, incorporating it into a new pattern of being. When my beloved teacher Shams vanished from my life, I thought wisdom had departed with him. For months I was inconsolable. I neglected my duties. I wrote poems of such raw anguish that those who heard them wept with me. But one dawn, as I knelt for morning prayers, I felt a subtle shift within. The pain had not disappeared, but something was now present alongside it, a tender gratitude for having known such a love at all. I realized that my grief was, in its own way, a continuation of love. The depth of my sorrow was precisely matched to the height of the joy we had shared. They were not separate emotions, but the same emotion viewed from different sides, like the moon's dark and illuminated faces. This is the counterintuitive truth I offer you. Grief is not the end of love, but its transformation. The tears you shed water the seeds of a deeper capacity to embrace life in all its complexity. The heart, broken open by loss, becomes capable of holding more, not less. But this transformation requires patience and gentle attention. It cannot be rushed. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly through force of will, but through surrender to the necessary darkness of the cocoon. Your grief is such a cocoon, a temporary enclosure where profound change occurs in secret. God does not stand apart from your suffering, watching from a distance. God inhabits the very center of your pain, experiencing it with you, holding each tear as precious. When you feel most alone in your grief, you are paradoxically closest to the divine presence, for God is nearer to the brokenhearted. This is not empty comfort, but profound truth. The crack in your heart is where the light enters. The very wound you wish would heal becomes the sacred space where grace pours in most abundantly. There's a practice I learned during my own season of grief. Each night before sleep, I would place 3 small stones by my bedside. In the morning, I would hold each stone for a moment and name one quality of the beloved I had lost, not focusing on their absence, but on the gift their life had been. One stone might represent their laughter, another their wisdom, another the way they made even ordinary moments feel sacred. Gradually, this simple ritual shifted my attention from what had been taken to what had been given. The stones became tangible reminders that while death ends a life, it cannot end a relationship or erase the ways another soul has shaped yours. Try this gentle practice for 7 days. Find 3 small objects, stones, beads, anything that feels right to hold. Each morning, touch each one briefly while naming aloud one quality or memory you treasure. Let your grief become a gateway to gratitude. This is not to diminish your pain, but to place it within a larger context of the continuing love that death cannot diminish. The objects themselves will begin to carry the energy of this remembrance, becoming sacred tools for healing. Remember this truth that contradicts our usual thinking. Healing does not mean forgetting. You will not get over a profound loss, but will learn to integrate it into the continuing story of your life. The goal is not to leave grief behind, but to carry it more gracefully, to allow it to soften from an acute pain into a tender acknowledgement of love's enduring power. Some days will still bring tears, certain anniversaries will still feel heavy, but gradually, imperceptibly, the ratio changes. More light than darkness, more gratitude than anguish, more connection than isolation. Let your grief teach you its unique wisdom. Let it slow your steps so that you notice the world more fully. Let it soften your defenses so that you become more compassionate toward others who suffer. Let it show you what truly matters so that you live with greater intention. Let it connect you to the universal experience of loss that all humans share. In this way, even your deepest pain becomes a doorway to a more authentic and connected life. The heart that has been broken and mended with gold becomes stronger at the broken places, more beautiful for having been wounded and healed. The cage that holds you now was built slowly, one small surrender at a time. Perhaps it began with innocent curiosity, or with the desire to numb a pain you did not know how to face, or with a moment of weakness that became a pattern. Now, the chains feel like part of your body. Each morning you awaken with the familiar weight of shame. Each night you sleep beneath promises broken to yourself once again. I know this cycle intimately. I have watched strong men and women reduced to shadows by substances that promised freedom while delivering bondage. I have seen brilliant minds dimmed by habits that began as occasional comforts and became daily necessities. I have witnessed the slow erosion of dignity, the gradual withdrawal from loved ones, the increasing isolation that makes the cage feel like the only safe place, even as it becomes a prison. There was a period in my youth when I became enthralled by intellectual pursuits that fed my pride rather than my soul. Knowledge became my intoxicant. I collected facts and philosophies like precious gems, displaying them to impress others while my heart remained untransformed. Each new scroll, each new debate victory reinforced the pattern. I did not recognize that I had fashioned a beautiful cage that kept me from the direct experience of truth. My addiction was different from yours in its details, but identical in its essence. I had given my power to something outside myself, believing it would complete me, while it slowly consumed what was most precious within me. The day of my awakening came unexpectedly. I was crossing a courtyard, arms full of manuscripts I had been studying, when a simple dervish approached me. Shams of Tabriz looked directly into my eyes and asked a question that collapsed my careful constructions. What use is knowledge that does not liberate you from yourself? He took my precious books and dropped them into a nearby fountain. As I watched the ink dissolve into the water, something dissolved within me as well, the illusion that intellectual understanding could substitute for lived transformation. That moment began my true education, my recovery from the addiction to knowing about truth rather than embodying it. Your awakening may come differently. Perhaps it already has, a moment when you saw with perfect clarity what the addiction has cost you. A child's disappointed eyes, a lover's final departure, a reflection in the mirror you no longer recognized, a doctor's solemn warning, or simply a quiet morning when the full weight of repeated failures pressed down with such force that something finally broke, not your spirit, but the shell around your spirit that had grown too rigid, too defensive. This breaking is not the end. It is the necessary beginning. If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here, I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. Now I must tell you something that contradicts conventional wisdom about recovery. The path to freedom does not begin with fighting against your addiction. It begins with surrendering the fight itself. This sounds like madness, I know. The world tells you to battle harder, to summon more willpower, to wage war against your weakness. But consider, has this approach succeeded? Has fighting against your chains loosened them or only made them feel heavier? The paradoxical truth is this: transformation begins with honest acceptance of exactly where you are. Not resignation, which is passive, but acceptance, which is deeply active, a clear seeing that creates space for genuine change. Sit quietly with me for a moment. Place your hand over your heart and simply acknowledge the truth without judgment. This is where I am now. This habit has a hold on me. I have tried and failed many times. I am tired of fighting. Feel how this simple honesty creates a small opening, a tiny space between you and the compulsion that has seemed inseparable from your identity. In that space, small as a mustard seed, dwells the possibility of a different relationship with yourself and with the habit that has claimed so much of your life energy. God enters through precisely such cracks in our certainty, such moments of humble truth-telling. The next step may surprise you as well. Instead of focusing on eliminating the unwanted behavior, turn your attention to cultivating its opposite. If addiction has narrowed your life, consciously widen it through one small action each day. If substance has become your primary relationship, nurture one genuine human connection, however briefly. If compulsion has made your movements mechanical, bring full awareness to one ordinary activity. The preparation of tea, the feeling of water on your skin, the miracle of breath entering and leaving your body. The secret is this: What you feed will grow. Feed your awareness rather than your addiction, your connection rather than your isolation, your humanity rather than your compulsion. There is a practice that helped me when I was breaking free from my own attachments. Each morning, I would place a small cup of water before me. Before drinking, I would hold it to the light, noticing how it captured the sun, how it remained pure despite what it reflected. Then I would whisper, "Today I choose clarity. I choose to see myself and my actions truthfully. I choose to nourish what gives life rather than what diminishes it." Then I would drink slowly, feeling the water travel through my body, imagining it washing away confusion and renewing my intention. This simple ritual became an anchor in difficult moments, a physical reminder of the clarity I was cultivating one day at a time. Try this practice each morning for 40 days. The number 40 appears repeatedly in spiritual traditions. 40 days of rain, 40 years in the desert, 40 days of fasting. It represents a complete cycle of transformation. Your commitment to this small ritual does not guarantee freedom from temptation, but it establishes a foundation of mindfulness that makes conscious choice more possible. When the moment of craving arrives, you will have created an alternative pathway in your nervous system, a space between stimulus and response where freedom can take root. Remember this truth that contradicts our usual thinking. Recovery is not a return to how you were before addiction, but an evolution into someone you have not yet become. The Japanese practice of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, creating an object more beautiful and valuable than the original. Your healing follows a similar principle. The very places where you have been broken will become your greatest strength, your unique offering to the world. Your struggle is not meaningless suffering, but a crucible where wisdom is forged, where compassion is deepened, where authentic strength replaces the false strength of denial. God does not wait for your perfection to draw near. God is already present in your struggle, in your falling and rising, in your humility and your hope. The divine sees beyond the behavior to the beautiful soul temporarily obscured by addiction. When you cannot hold this vision of yourself, God holds it for you, waiting patiently for your eyes to clear. This is not permission to continue destructive patterns, but assurance that your worth remains intact despite them. You are not your addiction. You are not your relapse. You are the awareness that observes both and continues to choose life, however imperfectly. There is a particular heaviness to the worry that comes with empty pockets and hungry mouths that depend on you. I have seen it in the eyes of fathers who return home with less than their children need, in the midnight calculations of mothers who divide too little among too many, in the proud shoulders that gradually bend under the weight of constant scarcity. This burden you carry is not simply about money. It is about dignity, about promise, about your deepest desire to shield those you love from the harsh winds of want. I know how this worry follows you from waking to sleep, how it colors every decision, how it whispers that you have failed, even when you have given everything. I know how it makes the simplest joys feel like luxuries you cannot afford, how it steals the present moment by constantly pulling your thoughts toward an uncertain tomorrow. Let me sit with you in this reality without offering false comfort or easy solutions. The path I will show you does not deny your material needs, but places them within a larger understanding that can transform your relationship with both provision and lack. During my years in Kenya, there came a season of great drought. The markets grew sparse, prices soared, and many families struggled to secure even basic necessities. I watched as neighbors who had lived comfortably became acquainted with hunger. One evening, a merchant who had lost everything came to me. His eyes were hollow, his voice barely audible as he confessed, "I can no longer feed my children. What kind of father does this make me?" His question hung in the air between us, heavy with shame and despair. Instead of answering immediately, I invited him to join me for evening prayers. Reluctantly, he knelt beside me on the worn prayer rug. As we completed the ritual movements, I noticed how his breathing gradually slowed, how his clenched hands softly opened. When we finished, I shared with him a teaching that had been revealed to me during my own periods of material uncertainty. The world speaks of provision as something you must chase, grasp, and secure through constant activity and worry. But I've observed that this approach often creates a subtle constriction in the heart, a narrowing of vision that actually blocks the very flow it seeks to capture. The merchant, like many of us, had equated his worth with his ability to provide, seeing himself solely as the source rather than as a channel through which provision moves. This perspective had doubled his suffering, adding the pain of diminished identity to the practical challenges he faced. The counterintuitive truth I offered him was this: your value does not rise or fall with your financial circumstances. The hand that cannot give gold today can still give attention, wisdom, presence, and prayer. These gifts, though invisible in the marketplace, create a foundation from which material restoration becomes possible. I taught him a practice I had learned through my own trials. Each morning, before the mind becomes entangled in problems to solve, sit quietly for 3 minutes with open palms resting on your knees. This posture embodies both receptivity and release, open to receive what comes, open to let go of the illusion of control. Breathe slowly while silently affirming, I place my need in the hands of the provider who has never forgotten any creature. I open myself to unexpected channels of sustenance. This practice does not replace practical action, but creates an inner condition where action can flow from trust rather than panic, from clarity rather than confusion. It reminds us that while we must use our hands to work, the ultimate outcomes rest in larger hands than our own. The merchant committed to this practice despite his initial skepticism. Within weeks, he reported a subtle but significant shift. His circumstances had not yet dramatically improved, but he had regained something precious, the ability to be fully present with his family rather than constantly absent in his worry. He began to notice small openings, small provisions that his anxiety had previously rendered invisible. A neighbor sharing extra bread, an unexpected opportunity to trade services rather than money, inner resources of creativity and adaptability that scarcity actually awakened rather than diminished. His children responded not to the continued material limitations, but to his renewed presence, his ability to find gratitude even within constraint. God does not stand apart from your financial struggles, observing with indifference or judgment. God moves within these very constraints, teaching lessons that abundance often fails to teach, the difference between needs and wants, the joy of small sufficiencies, the strength of interdependence rather than isolated self-reliance. There is a divine alchemy that can transform limitation into liberation when we stop fighting against our circumstances long enough to discern the invitation hidden within them. This is not passive acceptance of injustice or permanent lack, but a strategic surrender that conserves the energy wasted in resistance and redirects it toward creative adaptation. The path through financial challenge is not a straight line, but a spiral. There will be days when providence seems abundant, followed by days when old fears return. Do not interpret these fluctuations as evidence of spiritual failure. The desert traveler experiences both oasis and dry expanses, sometimes within the same day. What matters is not the changing terrain, but the consistent direction of your caravan. Each time worry rises, return to the practice of open palms. Each time shame whispers its accusations, remember that your worth transcends your wallet. Each time comparison tempts you to believe that others have found an easier path, turn your attention back to the unique journey entrusted to your steps alone. Consider adding this practical action to your daily rhythm. Before spending any money, pause for 3 breaths. In that brief space, ask yourself, does this expenditure align with my deepest values? Does it serve genuine need or momentary impulse? This simple practice introduces consciousness into economic decisions often made automatically or emotionally. It creates a boundary between external pressures and internal wisdom. It transforms each financial choice, however small, into an opportunity for alignment rather than a source of later regret. The amount in your account may not change immediately, but your relationship with that amount shifts fundamentally. Remember this truth that contradicts conventional thinking. Provision flows most abundantly to those who have learned to find sufficiency in what they already have. The constant sense of not enough creates a constriction that actually repels the very expansion it seeks. Begin instead from gratitude for what remains even amid loss. Clean and organize your current resources rather than fixating on what is missing. Prepare simple food mindfully rather than eating hastily while worrying about tomorrow's meal. Pay one small debt instead of anxiously reviewing the entire burden. These focused actions create small completions that gradually restore your sense of agency and invite unexpected provision. True wealth is measured not by what you possess, but by what possesses you. When anxiety about money owns your thoughts, you live in poverty regardless of the numbers in your account. When gratitude owns your awareness, you live in abundance even while navigating material constraints. This is not magical thinking, but practical wisdom. The mindset free from financial obsession becomes capable of recognizing opportunities, connections, and resources that fear renders invisible. Your provision awaits your perception. Your sustenance seeks your stillness. Your daily bread arrives on the path of presence, not panic. The hand that remains open can both receive and give, while the fist that clenches in fear accomplishes neither. I see how your mind moves without rest, like a bird that has forgotten it can land. From one worry to the next, from past regrets to future fears, from one unfinished plan to another abandoned dream. This constant motion creates the illusion of activity while keeping you trapped in the same patterns, the same questions, circling without resolution. You fall exhausted into bed at night, thoughts still spinning, then wake to the same internal noise before your eyes even open. I think too much and act too little, you confess to yourself in moments of clarity. I know what needs changing, but remain unchanged. The gap between your understanding and your implementation grows wider, feeding the very anxiety that keeps you paralyzed. This cycle is not unfamiliar to me. There was a time when my own intellect became a labyrinth where I wandered, analyzing spiritual truths rather than embodying them, collecting insights that remained imprisoned in thought rather than liberated through action. It was during my studies in Damascus that I encountered a simple water carrier who would transform my understanding of this condition. Each day, I would see him moving through the marketplace, his weathered face serene despite the heavy jugs balanced across his shoulders. One particularly hot afternoon, overcome with theoretical questions that had kept me awake for nights, I approached him. "How do you maintain such peace while carrying such weight?" I asked, hoping for some profound philosophical response. He looked at me with gentle amusement. "When I pour completely," he said. "When I walk completely. When I rest completely. The jug is heavy only when I'm half in yesterday or tomorrow." He adjusted his load and continued on his way, leaving me standing with my mouth open, holding books that suddenly felt heavier than his water jugs. That water carrier possessed what I had been seeking through complex theological arguments, the secret of presence. His simple words contained a wisdom that contradicts our modern assumption that more thinking leads to better living. The truth I gradually came to embody is this: clarity emerges not from endless analysis, but from committed action. The mind that constantly circles a problem without taking a single concrete step becomes increasingly confused rather than increasingly clear. The water of insight can only flow when the vessel of thought becomes still enough for clarity to settle. This stillness is not the absence of thought, but the anchoring of thought in the present moment, in the body, in the specific action that lies directly before you. There is a practice that helped me break free from the prison of overthinking. I call it the single grain of rice. Take one small action related to your most persistent worry or stalled project. Not the complete solution, not the perfect plan, just one grain, something so small that even your anxious mind cannot create a reasonable objection. If you worry about health, place one vegetable on your plate today. If financial concerns paralyze you, organize one drawer of papers. If a relationship needs healing, write one sentence of truth or gratitude. The size of the action matters less than its concreteness. This practice bypasses the mind's tendency to complicate and overwhelm, creating a tiny bridge between thought and manifestation. One grain becomes two, becomes a handful, becomes a bowl that nourishes genuine change. God does not dwell in the abstract realm of perfect plans never executed. God lives in the messy, imperfect present, where real hands touch real earth, where ideas descend into form, where love becomes visible through specific gestures, rather than vague intentions. When your thoughts spin endlessly around what should be different, what you should have done, what others should understand, you actually move further from divine presence rather than closer to it. The doorway to God opens through the portal of this moment, this breath, this single next step taken with full attention rather than divided consciousness. The divine is not waiting for you to figure everything out before you begin. The divine is waiting for you to begin so that the next step can reveal itself. Consider what happens when water remains in constant motion. It becomes cloudy, agitated, unable to reflect anything clearly. Only when water grows still can it mirror the sky. Your mind follows this same principle. The constant agitation of overthinking creates inner turbulence that distorts perception. Essential truths become obscured. Intuition cannot penetrate the noise. But when you create even brief periods of mental stillness, through prayer, through conscious breathing, through complete absorption in a simple task, the surface quiets and reflection becomes possible. You begin to see what was always visible but hidden by your own movement. Here is a practical discipline to cultivate stillness within motion. 3 times each day, when transitioning between activities, pause for exactly 1 minute. Stand or sit completely still. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your breath entering and leaving your body. Observe any thoughts arising without following their threads. When the minute ends, move into your next activity with full presence rather than carrying the previous hour's mental residue. This micro-pause seems insignificant, yet it creates vital boundaries between activities that would otherwise blur together in an undifferentiated stream of half-presence. The day segmented by these intentional transitions takes on a different quality, more spacious, more conscious, more available to inspiration that overthinking often blocks. The world tells you that more analysis will eventually produce clarity, that if you just think about your problems with sufficient intensity, solutions will emerge. But I've observed the opposite. Clarity comes from committed action, however small, followed by reflection, followed by refined action. If you have spent months or years thinking about the same challenges without tangible movement, more thinking will not break the pattern. Only the courage to act despite uncertainty can transform the landscape of possibilities. Begin with actions so modest that failure seems impossible. This builds the muscle of implementation that prolonged deliberation has weakened. Trust emerges from trustworthiness to yourself, from promises kept rather than intentions perpetually deferred. Remember this truth that contradicts conventional wisdom. Action precedes clarity rather than following it. The mind seeking complete certainty before taking the first step becomes trapped in its own requirements. The path illuminates itself beneath the feet of the walker, not the one who stands still demanding to see the entire journey before beginning. I am not suggesting reckless action without reflection, but rather a rhythmic alternation between doing and observing, between engagement and contemplation. This rhythm creates a spiral of increasing clarity rather than the closed circle of perpetual analysis. The water carrier taught me that wisdom comes through the body's participation, not merely the mind's speculation. Each morning, practice this ritual of embodiment. Before engaging with any screens or conversations, place your hand on your heart and ask, what one small action would most align my day with my deepest values? Listen for the answer that arises not from strategic calculation, but from the quiet voice beneath your thinking. Then, before the mind can complicate this guidance with 1,000 contingencies, commit to when and how you will complete this single action. Write it down. This practice grounds intention in the soil of specific commitment, beginning each day with the bridge from thought to manifestation already under construction. The anxious mind believes in scarcity of time, resources, and capability. It says, there is not enough hours, not enough money, not enough knowledge to begin. But this perception creates the very limitation it fears. The antidote is not more analysis of the limitation, but the courageous decision to work with what is available now. The master craftsman does not complain about having only 3 tools. He creates what is possible with those 3, and through that demonstration attracts the 4th. Provision follows proof of stewardship. Capacity increases through the full use of what you already possess. The universe responds not to your analysis of what should be possible, but to your faithful stewardship of what is already present. There is a particular ache that comes when life continues, but meaning seems to have departed. You move through your days performing necessary tasks, meeting obligations, perhaps even achieving what others would call success. Yet inside there remains a hollow space that no external accomplishment can fill. You wonder silently, is this all? Is this why I'm here? Sometimes this question arrives after great loss, when what once gave your day's direction has been taken away. Sometimes it emerges in midlife, when the goals that drove your youth have been either achieved or abandoned, leaving you standing on an unfamiliar plateau without a clear summit ahead. Sometimes it comes after spiritual disappointment, prayers that seemed unanswered, faith communities that failed you, religious practices that gradually emptied of vitality. I know this territory of the soul. I have walked its barren landscapes and sat beneath its starless skies. When I was a respected teacher in Kenya, with students who traveled great distances to study with me, I awakened one morning to a devastating realization. I was teaching what I had been taught rather than what I had lived. My words carried the weight of tradition and scholarship, but lacked the fire of direct experience. I had become a carrier of spiritual information rather than transformation. My prayers, once vibrant conversations with the divine, had become rote recitations. My heart, once open to revelation in every encounter, had grown defended and predictable. No one else could see this inner wasteland. From the outside, I appeared as a devout and accomplished spiritual authority. But inside, I knew the truth. I had lost my way while guiding others on a path I was no longer truly walking. It was in this state of hidden crisis that I encountered Shams of Tabriz, the wandering mystic who would shatter my comfortable illusions and reawaken my dormant spirit. He did not offer gentle reassurance or incremental adjustments to my existing worldview. He confronted me with questions that stripped away my intellectual defenses and forced me to face my spiritual poverty. "Does your knowledge free you from yourself?" he demanded. "Do your prayers change you or merely comfort you? Have you loved God only for the gifts received, or would you love as faithfully through loss?" These questions were not philosophical exercises, but urgent interventions, like a physician probing a wound to remove what prevents healing. His presence in my life initiated a profound dismantling, followed by a rebirth I could never have engineered through my own efforts. This is the counterintuitive truth about finding purpose that I offer from my own journey. Your deepest calling is not discovered through strategic planning or logical analysis, but through surrender to the very questions that most disturb your certainty. The path to meaning often begins with the courage to acknowledge its absence, to sit in the uncomfortable space of not knowing without prematurely reaching for familiar answers or distractions. The hollow feeling you interpret as emptiness may actually be spaciousness being prepared for a larger purpose than you have previously imagined. The confusion you resist may be the necessary dissolution of old structures to make way for new growth. The darkness is not the absence of light, but the gestation of vision that can only develop away from familiar illumination. There is a practice that served as my anchor during this passage through purposelessness. Each dawn, I would face east as the first light appeared on the horizon. With my palms open before me, I would whisper this simple prayer. I empty my hands of yesterday's certainties. I open my heart to today's mysteries. Use me according to your wisdom, not my understanding. This daily gesture of release and receptivity gradually shifted something essential. I stopped trying to forcibly construct meaning according to my preconceptions and began to attune myself to the subtle guidance that emerges when we Release our demand for answers on our terms, in our time frame. Purpose, I discovered, reveals itself not to those who grasp, but to those who remain faithfully available. God does not view your period of confusion or apparent purposelessness as wasted time or spiritual failure. What appears as a barren desert from your perspective may be, from the divine vantage point, a necessary fallow season where the soil of your soul rests and replenishes after one harvest and before the next planting. Even in nature, not every season produces visible fruit. Winter's seeming emptiness prepares for spring's abundance. The seed must disintegrate completely in darkness before new growth can emerge. Your current experience of meaninglessness may be precisely such a sacred transition, not an absence to escape, but a presence to engage with reverent attention. Consider adopting this simple but profound discipline for the next 7 mornings. Before engaging with any technology or conversation, sit quietly for 3 minutes with a small object held between your palms, a stone, a bead, anything that feels right to you. As you hold it, allow one question to rest in your awareness. What am I being emptied of, and what am I being prepared for? Do not strain for dramatic revelations or immediate clarity. Simply create the space for deeper currents to rise naturally to the surface of consciousness. After the 3 minutes, write one sentence, just one, capturing any insight, image, or intuition that arose. Over the 7 days, these sentences will begin to form a constellation of guidance, subtle but substantial, pointing toward your next faithful step. The modern world suggests that purpose is something you create through force of will and strategic planning. But I have found that authentic purpose is not created, but discovered, not constructed, but uncovered. It emerges from the intersection of 3 elements: your deepest joy, the world's genuine need, and the unique gifts you have been given to offer. This intersection cannot be located through abstract analysis alone, but through engaged experimentation. Small, concrete actions taken with full presence that provide feedback for your next movement. Purpose reveals itself through participation, not contemplation alone. The water carrier does not discover his purpose by thinking about water, but by actually carrying it to those who thirst. When meaning seems most absent, try this paradoxical approach. Instead of focusing on finding your purpose, focus on serving someone else's immediate need. Prepare a meal for a neighbor. Listen fully to someone who rarely feels heard. Contribute your skills to a community project without concern for recognition. These acts of selfless attention often become unexpected doorways to clarity about your own path. They shift your awareness from abstract questions to tangible impact, from future uncertainty to present possibility. They reconnect you with the fundamental truth that purpose is not primarily about self-fulfillment, but about meaningful contribution to the greater fabric of life. Remember this truth that contradicts our usual assumption. Purpose is not a destination you reach once and permanently inhabit. It is more like breath, a continuous rhythm of receiving and giving, a dynamic relationship rather than a static achievement. There will be times of clear direction followed by periods of recalibration and uncertainty. This cycle is not a sign of failure, but the natural pulse of an evolving spiritual journey. Even the most seemingly purposeful lives contain these rhythms of clarity and confusion, expansion and contraction. The mature soul learns to trust both movements equally, finding meaning not only in the illuminated path, but in the necessary darkness that reshapes vision. If this message resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation. And leave in the comments, I am walking toward my sacred purpose. This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself. I offer you this final insight. The search for meaning is itself meaningful. The very fact that you hunger for purpose reveals that you are already in relationship with your deeper calling, even if that relationship currently feels like absence or longing rather than fulfillment. The question, why am I here, is not merely an expression of confusion, but a sign of awakening. It indicates that you have recognized the insufficiency of living only for comfort, security, or the approval of others. It signals your readiness for a more authentic engagement with the mystery of your existence. Honor this hunger. It is not your enemy, but your guide, not your failure, but your faithfulness to what matters most. Before closing our conversation, I invite you to practice this simple but powerful ritual. Tonight, before sleep, place your hand on your heart and speak these words aloud. I release my demand to understand everything now. I embrace the unfolding nature of purpose. I trust the wisdom that is revealing itself through every experience, even those that seem empty or painful. I am exactly where I need to be on this journey. Then, rest in the profound truth that meaning is not something you achieve through effort, but something you open to through surrender, not to passivity or resignation, but to the greater wisdom that has been guiding you long before you became aware of its presence. Your purpose has been pursuing you even when you thought you were pursuing it. Your life has significance even when that significance remains temporarily hidden from your view. The very longing you feel is evidence of the connection you seek.